our average listener is a highly intelligent person, but no one person can be well-informed on everything. I am living proof of that. That is why we need great journalists. One of our favorite journalists around is our next guest. He's something of a regular on our program. I hope he stays that way. Ryan Grim is the Washington bureau chief for the Huffington Post and an MSNBC contributor. He has a long list of journalistic cred, and he is the author of the book, This Is Your Country on Drugs. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be a regular.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it. And before we get into some of the stuff that's going on up on Capitol Hill, which is the main theme of our discussion, I did see before we went to air that you had written to let us know that a Republican senator has said the Lego movie is part of an insidious propaganda campaign against business owners. And I thought that was an important story because I think nothing says revolution or up against the wall motherfuckers like the Lego movie. So what's up with that?
Oh, the best part is that, right, so this is Ron Johnson, who's kind of the, probably the slowest ship in the Republican fleet over there in the Senate. And, he won in 2010. He beat Russ Feingold. He's up against Russ Feingold again in 2016. In any event, he thinks that he thinks that there is a cultural attitude, quote unquote, that says that government is good and business is bad, and that's because of a concerted Hollywood propaganda campaign that stretches beyond Hollywood. Fox News has roped in the Muppets and the Lorax, and all the way back to It's a Wonderful Life with the cruel depiction of Mr. Potter. All of this to kind of perpetrate this negative image of the mean boss. Of course, I think polls would probably show that the average person would check the opposite boxes. Unfortunately, that they think business is good and government bad, but that's neither here nor there. As you know, the wealthy tend to be among the very most sensitive people on the planet. In fact, so sensitive that he has already written like a 600-word screed attacking me for it, and has been tweeting on and on about it and defending himself.
Let me get this. Let me get this right. So
I published this like an hour ago. This guy's quick.
What's that?
Yeah, he's quick. I published this an hour or two ago, and he already has a long blog post on his own campaign website attacking me for the story. Quite
so what's
amusing.
his point? That what's he saying? That you don't understand that Hollywood is demonizing business and you're part of the big lefty conspiracy?
What he's saying is that there's nothing. He's not saying unusual in the fact that Hollywood often demonizes business, and I think that's probably a fair point. There are like Mr. Potter is certainly a demon type of banker, and the businessman in the Lego movie was kind of a demon. I think it's kind of a stretch to say that we live in a culture that overall. That every businessman is thought of as a Mr. Scrooge.
Well, and I think there's another side of it too, which is, business people have a lot of power in this society. So if you're going to be a villain, look, what's Hollywood supposed to do? Make a movie about an evil fast food worker? They don't, they overcook your fries. I mean, the fact is,
they're serial killers. Right, you need power to be interesting.
Right. So,
like I said, not the fastest ship in the fleet.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, I was just a little distracted by that. But let's get to what's going on. Let's get to what's going on the Hill. Obviously, the big story is the Trans-Pacific Partnership and Fast Track. The Fast Track Amendment finally passed. Jump in if I say anything wrong, but the Fast Track Amendment finally passed Friday, but with a surprise in it that it sounds like it got put in and then they tried to take it out, but they didn't succeed in taking it out, having to do with slavery. And just give us like a quick update on that.
Bob Menendez put in a provision in committee when it moved through. So this was all done out in the open. That said that if you are a Tier 3 trafficking violator, forced labor violator, Tier 3 being the absolute worst of the worst, then you cannot be part of any trade deals that are approved through this fast-track process. It's one of those things that appears to be uncontroversial, kind of poison pill, kind of like the Republican attempt to kind of blow up the Iran deal by saying, well, Iran has to recognize Israel as part of this. That's a non-controversial kind of thing to assert. Like, of course, Israel's been around a very long time. Everybody should recognize that it is a state. On the other hand, Iran's not going to do it, and so
in this case, everybody supports ending slavery, but an anti-slavery provision in the bill means Malaysia, which has a horrible record in that area, can't be part of the agreement, which kills the agreement, right?
Well, it depends. So the question is, could the White House use its leverage in this moment, because Malaysia does want to be in this deal? They do not want to be, economically dependent on China. They'd prefer to be allied with, with us. So could the U.S. use its leverage? Could the U.S. use its leverage to get Iran to recognize Israel? Who knows? Probably not. Could it use its leverage to get Malaysia to crack down on slavery? It probably could. And so Menendez would, I think, be able to argue that it's not necessarily a poison pill, and that the U.S. should just be tougher in the way that it negotiates this deal, and not simply say, you know what, hey, throw our hands up, Malaysia likes slavery, and there's nothing we can do about it.
So, in trying to unpack all of this, here's what I get. What I get is that the president is negotiating a trade deal that includes one of the worst violators of slavery, and that includes, the sex trafficking trade and child labor, and, some of the products of this slave labor would be covered in the trade agreement. It doesn't appear that the U.S. government has made this deal in any way conditional on reducing that slavery. So the Senate comes in, amendment sponsored by Menendez with a moral credibility behind it, saying you can't do this deal with anyone who has slavery. And all of a sudden now, the deal's in danger? The fast-track agreement is in danger? The best that the White House can hope for is that it passes the House without a slavery amendment, and then it has to go back to the Senate, right?
They would have to fix it somehow, through coming back through the Senate or going through conference. That's right. Now, the irony is that Menendez, under a lot of pressure from the White House and from Senate Republican leadership, agreed to modify his amendment to say that as long as Malaysia or any other country is taking concrete steps toward reducing this problem, then they can be part of the trade deal. The problem there is taking concrete steps is the loosest possible thing. There don't have to be any actual tangible results from these concrete steps. They could, they could write up some executive order that.
Right. As I recall, the last trade deal required concrete steps towards not harassing and killing journalists, and they're still killing them right and left in Colombia. Right,
and that's with a lot more kind of enforcement mechanisms in place. This wouldn't have any. All this would have is the State Department would have to certify that Malaysia is at least trying to do something. And you can imagine that the State Department would be under enormous pressure, to write that letter every year. But now here's the funny part. Menendez agreed to the modification. Senate Republican leadership wanted it, White House wanted it, but this is the Senate, and they couldn't get it done. Some unknown Republican objected to votes on an entire package of amendments, of which Menendez's modification was one of them. And because McConnell has made such a cock-up of running the Senate, they were it was midnight, up against a recess, and they still had to do the Patriot Act thing. So he's just said, forget it. We'll just pass it as it is. So they passed the fast-track bill with the original stronger language in it, and so that is why now the House has to try to deal with it. And it presents a problem a political problem, because now you have the president out there saying, look, this is not, this is going to raise labor standards. This is not going to bring wage pressure on American workers, because this is going to, we're going to enforce labor rights overseas. And somebody say, oh, great, Malaysia had, countenances slavery, so we're going to do something about that. Well, no, not necessarily going to do anything about slavery in Malaysia.
See, we're talking with Ryan Grimm, Washington bureau chief of the Huffington Post, and see, there's two ways to look at this in my book. One is that it was a procedural foul-up that creates an embarrassing situation for the administration and a problem in getting this fast-track bill passed. The other way to look at it, the way that I look at it, is it's karma. You have a bill here which really, I think, first of all, I adamantly opposed to it from what we know about it. And fast track limits the ability to debate it, and now you have this compromise with a nation that has a terrible slavery record, endangering the whole thing. But am I right? Is it endangering the whole thing, or is this really just a slight bump on the road to?
This thing is on such a razor's edge, as all trade deals are. NAFTA passed by 2 votes. That any time you're operating with this little room for error, every error costs you. We just ran a story today where Elizabeth Warren is, saying that Malaysia should not be part of this deal, and don't allow the House, the Senate, should not allow the House to fix this, quote unquote fix. So now it's, with Warren weighing in, it's more of a political issue, and it just becomes a bigger problem, for trying to get it through the House and now theoretically back through the Senate. Previously, if they had pulled this off efficiently, all they would have to do is round up the votes in the House and get it to the White House. Now that was an extremely tall order in its own right, and one I think they actually will fail at. But that's a different question. Let's say they pull that off, then they're done. Obama signs it and they're done.
Right.
Now they have to route it back through the Senate. Here's what's actually more interesting. So what I've been able to learn is that Paul Ryan is going to try to fix this legislation in a separate bill. They call it a customs enforcement bill. So in order to do that, they're going to have to strip out a lot of things Democrats like, and then they're going to have to water down this slavery language. Then they're going to have to move that back through the Senate. I think that's a pretty tall order. Let's say they don't do that. That means they pass fast track with the strong slavery language, which means by law they'd have to kick Malaysia out of this deal. They really don't want to kick Malaysia out of this deal for geopolitical reasons, because they control the shipping corridor over there. So then the State Department could just certify that they're no longer a Tier 3 violator. Done. And so I think that would be the next thing to kind of watch, and I think that they would do that before they would let this whole deal fall apart. Because it's not like there are independent auditors. It's just people at the State Department reviewing the record and making a designation.
Right. Now we're talking with Ryan Grimm of the Huffington Post. I guess the last aspect of this I wanted to talk to you about was the geopolitical. So some of that geopolitical interest we're talking about. Malaysia is strategically located both in terms of military and trade purposes, in terms of China. But one of the questions, and you wrote a good piece on that, and on the geopolitical and military interests kind of driving this, the president's interest in this deal. But I guess what I wonder is the pushback I hear from the other side is that there's nothing in this deal that necessarily restrains China's ability to keep trading with these countries, and we are already trading with these countries, and that the real struggle with China over influence is going to take place whether we have this agreement or not.
Yes, that's true. The more access that our Navy can have to the Strait of Malacca, the better positioned the U.S. is militarily vis-a-vis China. So, the point that they're making almost makes the other point that, the kind of confrontation is happening as we speak, and will continue to happen and only intensify. And kind of the placement of the ships and the subs around the region, is what balances the power more in one direction or another. Now, I think you could say, well, for what? what's been the benefit to the American worker of this great empire we've had the last 30, 40 years. Wages haven't budged.
Sure.
Clearly, there's been a benefit, but it's gone to the very top. So, a worker could certainly be reasonable in asking, okay, maybe America, in the aggregate, does benefit by us being a stronger global power against China, but all of that aggregate benefit goes to the top 1%. So you guys deal with it, and we don't need to take a pay cut, to make this happen. So I think that's kind of, I think, where somebody like Sherrod Brown is coming from. And somebody like Elizabeth Warren would say, if you're going to look at this from a national security perspective, one of the great strengths of America is its middle class and its consumption economy. And if you eviscerate that too much, you'd be careful, because then you don't have then you're not the center of power anymore.
And I think there's both great arguments, and I think it sounds like, from what you've described, that what we're seeing now is, having tried to get this deal, if the president fails to get it, or fails to get Malaysia included, or insults Malaysia, it will not only not have gained anything, it may have lost us in terms of strategic interests.
I don't know. So the Malaysian press has picked up on our story, and the foreign minister told the media out in Malaysia basically that they have a side deal with the U.S. that they're going to be okay one way or the other. That's what it seemed. That's what he seemed to be saying. So I think, like I said, Malaysia, if it had wanted closer relations with China, it could have them by now. China is not the cuddliest country to partner with. I think we're kind of a much more kind of sophisticated empire, so to speak. I think people probably see a lot of I think countries like Malaysia see a benefit to partnering with our kind of corporate driven empire, as opposed to China's, which can be a little more aggressive, building
right, and more nationalistic in a sense.
Exactly.
We're more corporatistic, but I think
right.
So, well, it's a fascinating story, and I'm glad you're staying on top of it, because it's got complex ins and outs and moral dimensions to it. So, as always, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Ryan Grimm, Washington Bureau Chief of the Huffington Post. We will be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.